So browsing through my Facebook feed, I came across a post by Lennox Lewis, the former British world champion boxer. But this video is not about boxing, it's about an update he made, and it has reminded me about something which is very topical right now, and which initially I was reluctant to talk about, but I think it has to be addressed now. This is the post that he made. I'm not going to put a link because it's hard to do that with the way the way the post is, but basically it says, "This is what many black Americans see and become increasingly infuriated. Change is needed." And he has this sort of link that is showing a number of infamous white spree killers, serial killers in the States, and it's saying murders 6, murders 8, and under each of the photographs it says apprehended. It shows a number of well-known black victims such as Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown. It says murder 0, and then underneath murdered. So the insinuation here is that if you're white in America and you commit a murder, you're going to be acquitted, and if you're black, you're going to be victimized. Now, I think, frankly, this is very irresponsible of Lennox Lewis. And I say this as someone, he is one of those fighters that I like and I respect, but I think for someone in his position to come out with this sort of post is very irresponsible, especially given current tensions in America. And I say in America, not just in Ferguson, because the protests have spread now that Officer Wilson has been acquitted. The protests have spread, and this is a very topical issue. Looking at the comments under all the CNN updates, and of course CNN has attracted controversy, people have accused them of race baiting. There is very divisive views. There is some unifying views as well. I think Obama, his response has been very measured and responsible, I would say. He said that anger is justifiable, but, well, basically the response from what I've seen, I didn't see the whole speech, but he said there's no excuses for the looting and the violence, and I agree with that. There is no excuses. And I would like to see, though, more of those who are justifying the protests to come out and condemn the violence, because burning someone's business out, looting shops, it does nothing to pass bills, as President Obama pointed out. Now, the issue I want to talk about in this video is race baiting, which itself is probably a controversial term, but it is a term that gets used a lot. Basically what it means is throwing accusations around about racism. Now, as an outsider, I do believe that America is still a very divided society. I'm sorry if you find that an offensive statement, but as an outsider, that's how it comes across. There does seem to be a huge gulf between African Americans and white Americans when these issues come about, and it's not universal. I saw one black guy saying he sides with Officer Wilson, and I've seen lots of white people sympathizing with the protests and against Officer Wilson. But nevertheless, there is an obvious gulf, and whilst it's true that CNN is probably stirring things up, I think there is some truth in some of the, for example, the statistics that they've come out with. That they posted one statistic saying such a percentage of whites think this, such a percentage of blacks think that. Now, on one hand, that's irresponsible journalism, because they're maybe fanning the flames. On the other hand, if that is what the polls are saying, that is what the polls are saying. And it demonstrates that there is a division in society. Now, insofar as race baiting is concerned, I think it's very, very unfortunate in the year 2014, given America's history. As a white guy myself, I'm not going to pretend I understand what it is like to be an African American. I'm not going to say that because it would be patronizing and it would be presumptive, and I don't know. All I can do is reflect not only as a non-American, but as an outsider, and reflect on how I see the situation. And how I see the situation is that people are looking through a very narrow scope. Far too many people are looking through a very narrow scope. It seems to me that there are a lot of African Americans who look at injustice, and unquestionably there is injustice, but then they automatically assume it is a victimhood thing, and assume that only African Americans suffer from injustice. Now, that is one reason I take issue with Lennox Lewis's post, is he was insinuating only black people are victims of violence in America, which is rubbish. It's utter rubbish, and it is irresponsible. There are many examples of innocent white Americans who have also been victims of violence, whether at the hands of other white people or black gangs. So the idea that only black Americans suffer from violence is just rubbish. That is an example of race baiting, trying to insinuate that there is it is basically promoting a victimhood mentality. And I know that will be a controversial statement, but it's how I see it. That's not to say that there isn't injustice and there isn't racism out there, because there is. But making sweeping statements like only African Americans suffer from violence is abjectly wrong. There are many examples of innocent white Americans also suffering from violence, whether that be in spree shootings or whether it be as victims of African American gangs. Likewise, there is far too many examples of unarmed young black men being killed by the police. So, if there's to be any way forward, I think Americans need to come together, Americans need to come together and address these problems together, rather than always looking at it as a race issue. There are white racists who view all black Americans as violent thugs, and there are black Americans who view all white Americans as privileged racists. Now, both those stereotypes fall flat when you look at the basic facts. Yes, there is some trends in this. Yes, there are problems with both of the things that I have said, but what I find very frustrating, and hell, if I find it frustrating, I can't imagine what it would be like to be an American and to live in this situation. But what I find frustrating is that far too many people think in this prism of colour. They look at their fellow Americans not as fellow Americans, but as black or white. And until this mentality changes, I don't think America's going to go forward with these sort of situations. I saw one comment, this guy saying the whites have no right to complain because we came here in chains. Now that to me is an example of the victimhood mentality, because whilst there's injustices today, you can hardly compare it to slavery. So if you think that you're living like a slave, that's rubbish. Now, in terms of the indictment, I don't want to really go into the details, but I don't believe that Michael Brown was as squeaky clean as the protesters are making him out to be. I don't think that Officer Wilson would have just shot him without any reason whatsoever. That is my instinct. I might well be wrong, I was not there, but based on the statements that I've heard, I don't think that was the case. And let's be clear, this was not the government that Officer Wilson that didn't indict him. It was a jury of his peers, and it was mixed. There were black jurors there as well. So what I'm trying to get at here is all this constant race baiting, that it's always a race issue, and there are people on both sides guilty of it. There are African Americans who constantly push the victimhood issue, and there are white Americans who try to portray all black Americans as violent thugs. Now, I have no sympathy for those protesters, so-called, who are looting people's businesses. They have no moral credibility. They don't. If you're an African American and you're sort of saying, well, anger is justified, I would agree with you, it is, because there are a lot of problems out there. But burning someone's business, that's just bullshit. What does that achieve? And frankly, some of the attitudes from some African Americans are just as racist. If you're African American and you think all white people are racist, that in itself is by definition a racist attitude, demonizing an entire ethnic group because of the attitudes and actions of some. So because there may well be a problem with white police killing unarmed young black men, that does not mean the entire white race is racist. Likewise, my message to white Americans who take a certain attitude would be, just because there is a problem with black gangs doesn't mean every African American is a violent thug. So I am so sick and tired of seeing this attitude from both sides. And I actually believe there are a lot of Americans out there who don't think this way. And as President Obama said, those people need to get a lot more focus. And I do think CNN and other networks have been irresponsible by only focusing on the negative and only focusing on the race baiting. I would like to see a lot more positivity and a lot more focus on those Americans who are trying to come together and trying to deal with this and trying to move on and trying to see each other as fellow Americans, rather than a white guy or a black guy. Now, there is obviously some issues that need to be addressed on both sides. There is a problem with young black men, young unarmed black men being killed by the police. There is also a problem with black gangs in America. That's just a fact. There's white gangs as well, but let's not pretend that there is not a problem with young black men being involved in crime, because there blatantly is. And I think that the likes of Al Sharpton need to acknowledge this problem as honestly as they condemn police aggression. Now, the fact of the matter is, 99% of the people commenting on this, including myself, were not there when this incident happened. We don't know what was going through Officer Wilson's mind. He may well have felt genuinely threatened, and he may well have felt that he was acting in self-defense. On the other hand, he may have been overstretching his authority, and we weren't there. That's what's ironic about this. Whenever these things happen, there's a massive national outcry and protest, but most of the people, I mean, there's some incidents like the one I made a video about in New York recently, which was on videotape. This incident in Ferguson was not on videotape. So none of us were there. You cannot be sure. You just don't know. So you're jumping on what you have heard in the media or what you've heard from other people, and that's just reckless. I think it's depressing and it's unfortunate, and this is not an indictment of America as a whole. I believe America has come a long way, and I believe there are many Americans who don't have a racist attitude, who have black friends, who have white friends, but unfortunately there is still this polarization of society, and I don't think anyone can honestly dispute that. And I think it is true that if the situation was reversed and we were talking about a white victim of crime, it wouldn't get national attention in the same way. So I think it is indisputable that networks like CNN love stories like this. And they are race baiting insofar as they're giving constant updates about the tiniest details that people really don't need to know. I mean, they had a report earlier about Officer Wilson getting married recently. What the hell has that got to do with anything? That really pissed me off, because it's just sensationalist crap. Has no relevance whatsoever to the trial. or the case. So I just think it's a very unfortunate situation, and I think all open-minded Americans need to be responsible here, and people who are demonizing an entire ethnic group, whether it be believing that all white people are racist, or whether it be believing that all black people are criminal thugs, both those attitudes are very narrow, and they're not going to help America move forward. That is my opinion as an outsider.